and it's their intrinsic nature. Now, this food basically sounds feasible, sounds like. Everybody, thanks for watching. Now, all of us was born into a culture. Everybody here in America was born here into a culture. Now, your family may have traditions and, routines and things that they celebrate and may have followed for, hundreds of years in some cases. And, your parents was raised a certain way and they instill, those cultures, those traditions, those family values into you. And usually the person we become is based off of those, family morals, that culture, that family tradition. And we implement these things in our lives as we grow up. So, usually if you are born into a family who has two parents and, the parents stay together for, your whole life, usually that person grows up and wants to start a family. They, want to get married. They're usually stable because, when you are single, it's just you. You have no people looking to you for food or anything like that. You can go out, do whatever you want. But when you have a family, when you're married, it's more of a stable life because you have people depending on you. So there's more of a sense of urgency to be successful. Even when you are planning to have a family, you still know you need money, you need to be successful, you need to have a foundation. And if you come from a family that is based on these kind of morals, this kind of standing, that has a tradition, that's a real close family, usually everybody within that family will be doing okay. There's always the black sheep and the bad seed and the bad apple and stuff like that. But usually when you look into things like that, that's something else with that. Either parents was divorced or, it's problems in the family. But for the most part, people who are born into these stable families usually grow up to be, just like somebody successful in the family. The son takes over the family business, or the son goes to college and becomes successful as well. Usually that is the case. Now, some children don't want to follow in their parents' footsteps. They don't want to even have the same occupation as their parents. They don't want to be like their parents. Some children don't even succeed academically as well as their parents did. They just have their own way about them. They want to do their own things. They want to go their own way. But usually they still carry with them those same traditions, those same values, that same culture. And they are usually successful, and they graduate college and they go on to have a family, and they instill those same moral values, those same traditions and cultures into their children. And, the cycle continues. And, when the Europeans came over here, they was able to bring their traditions and their cultures with them and grow their families and learn new things and teach their families the traditions and grow their wealth. They was free to become successful. And they did this for hundreds of years before black people was able to even take two steps as free people, in the United States. So you have to understand that after centuries of seeing each other brutalized and raped and murdered and hanged, burnt alive, mistreated, they said, you can go free. You are free to go. And free to do what? Everything about us, our culture, everything that made us African, everything that made us who we are was taken from us. The only thing that was left was the culture of our captors, the traditions, the teachings that we learned, that we had at that point when we was free, was from our captors. Very, very little African traditions survived. The ones they really let us keep was the songs. That was usually about it, or sometimes the dances, or anything that they felt would benefit them. But for the most part, our culture was completely gone, wiped away. So if you understand that it is your culture, it is your family traditions, it is the values that is instilled in you that is passed down through, family after family, generation after generation. If we understand that this is what makes a person successful, this is what makes a person, become a good person, a great person, a successful person. What did they expect us to become, after slavery? So now the black people who got free, who survived slavery, they had to take their family out and try to survive and be successful. They still had a slave mentality. Their traditions, their culture, the things that they followed was still based off of, the slave masters' cultures, their teachings. So you have to understand who sets the standard for what is considered to be acceptable behavior as a citizen, here in America. Who sets the standard for what is considered to be sophisticated and correct behavior as a family, as people here in America? And that is white America. That is the government system who sets these standards. So here you have black people who are now free, who had to live their lives based on the culture, the traditions and teachings of their captors. These were not our traditions, not our culture. Everything that we knew, we learned during slavery. It wasn't us. It wasn't African, in short. So you got to understand. And I know some racist people are going to say, well, they should have just went back to Africa. And of course, and as I will prove in a later video, we were already here long before slavery. And that's something that if you don't understand now, you don't want to understand. There's too much proof out there now. We were already here. But you got to realize that we had to live based off another people's culture. We had to instill in us and, love what we learned and become what we learned. And, we accepted these teachings as American, as being us. And, over time, of course, that stuck. And now it's like, the 4th of July, and Christmas and Thanksgiving and everything that we celebrate is so normal. It's just what we've been taught. And we kept it. So people got to understand that when black people look at these holidays, when we look at these traditions that we are supposed to follow, especially, like the 4th of July, some black people don't want to follow these things because they understand that we were not free. Of course, black people shouldn't stand and salute the flag and, sing the national anthem where, it says the land of the free, home of the brave. Well, we wasn't free when that song was written. So who was it speaking to? It wasn't speaking to us. It was speaking to white America. So these traditions and these things that white people are proud of and that they put so much emotion into and they just think it's so America and America this. You have to remember the history of America, especially as it pertains to African Americans. This is not our culture. This is not our teachings. So how can anyone get upset that we don't want to follow certain things, that we want to put up a black fist or, sit down and protest, not against what you feel is right, not against the soldiers, not against the troops, but against what's happening to us, against what has happened to us. And this is what you got to understand and realize, especially if you're black. And I don't understand how anybody who's black could be gone against what Colin Kaepernick and, many other people around the NFL are doing, even though, as I said, it's a distraction from what really matters. So they don't want to talk about the real issues. They don't want to talk about, the shootings and the killings. They're not going to talk about on NFL Today and all these football shows about the preacher, the pastor who was just killed, by this cop for nothing, for breaking down, had his hands in the air, shot and killed. They're not going to talk about this stuff. They're going to focus on the fact that black people are disrespecting America and the troops. So as I pointed out in a previous video, that everything that Americans look to as being a reason for America's independence and freedom, like the American Revolution, we know African Americans as well played a large role in that. So if African Americans want to be proud of America and, be patriotic, they have every right to be, because we fought for this country as well. And we continue to fight in war. So the media is trying to make it look like, this They're trying to tie the whole Black Lives Matter movement and the whole, movement into us being unpatriotic, us being against America. And this is the language they're trying to use. This is what they're trying to influence on America, that, this whole movement is anti-American. It is against America. It's against the flag, and it's against all the troops and the soldiers that died and everything like that. Even though we fought for this country, they want us to forget everything that happened before we fought. They want us to forget about slavery. They want us to forget about Jim Crow and everything that happened, everything that we still going through, and to embrace everything that is America. Their traditions, their values, what they say goes. Nothing is done to fix what we lost as a people. No reparations were paid. Nobody made any kind of effort to find out where we came from or what our history really was. It's just fuck it. You're an American now. Be proud. Be happy that we allow you to be here. Shut up. Salute the flag. You have no rights, no nothing. This is the narrative that we get. And we're supposed to just take that and shut up. And this is what you gotta realize. We put up with a lot, as Black people. I mean, it's almost a fucking handicap to be Black. And it's sad to say that, but it's true. And when the media does what it do and spins everything that we do and make it controversial and make it as if we are just destroying America and everything like that, it's tough to, be the bigger person and let it slide. It's tough to protest peacefully. And some people do want to bash heads in and tear shit up and start a war, but we got to be smart about this whole thing and understand that this is part of an agenda. This is a trap. But it's so many, inconsiderate racist people out there who don't understand nothing, who don't realize what we are going through as a people, not just in our own communities, but, when we step outside, when we drive our cars, the worry we got to go through now because cops want to kill people. Now, in the NFL, they are not going to do a whole story on a preacher who was just killed, by this woman who was just shot with his hands up. His car broke down and killed him. It's murder. Clear as day. They're not going to do a story on him and his family, but they're going to keep pointing the cameras at, Malcolm Jenkins and the Eagles put their fist up on Monday night. You're going to keep talking about Colin Kaepernick. They're going to keep talking about the stupid shit that don't matter instead of addressing, what really matters. And as I said before, y'all, the same stuff is going to keep happening. They're going to keep killing us. It's going to continue to be controversy until something is done, until people wake up. So, I'm reading my usual racist messages from people, and usually when I get the same messages saying the same things about Black people from 4 or 5 different racist people, I understand that this is what they believe. And a lot of racist people say, well, your culture is the reason why you are in the situation you are in. It is because of the way you act and the way y'all live and your lifestyle. It's why Black people are messed up. They're trying to say, our culture and the way that we act and dress and talk and our music is the reason why the community is messed up. And the thing is, when people always go back to Africa and point to Africa and say, you guys were primitive and you live like animals and savages and a white man saved you from a life of sin and this and that, because they don't understand the true history of African people and how we were kings and queens long before, any European monarchy ever reigned. So the thing is, as I said earlier, who sets the standard for what is primitive? Who determines and decides what's primitive? What's crazy, what's weird? Who the hell is determining this? You can call something weird and crazy because you don't understand it. But just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's weird. You don't get it. That's all. And instead of saying that, people say, it's crazy, or, it's primitive. You can look at the dung beetle. The dung beetle, you have the dweller, you have the roller, and you have the tunneler. They have each important jobs in the survival of the dung beetle. The roller rolls the dung so that the dweller can lay eggs, and they also eat the dung. Now, to some people, this can be considered nasty or stupid, but they don't understand that they actually serve a purpose in the balance of nature. This is why the beetles are worshipped by a lot of ancient cultures. We know the ancient Egyptians and the scarab beetle. So just because a person doesn't understand something, or something looks, wrong to them, doesn't make it primitive. So when you look at the ancient Africans and the Africans today, just because people don't understand what they're doing and the spiritualistic nature behind the so-called rituals or the occult practices of what these Africans are doing, doesn't make them primitive. It doesn't make them crazy or stupid. This is why I put out the whole DVD on Voodoo, because you need to understand what's taking place and understand that it's not in no way, what white America or the Europeans say it is. So by whose standards is something considered wrong or weird or crazy? So how are we taking this one group and their definition of what is wrong and what is crazy and primitive? We are taking one definition from one group of people and using it and saying that this is the end all be all for what happened and what is happening in Africa. And as black people, we got to stop doing that. We have to understand our culture and where we came from, and things that we have been doing for thousands of years before the European was ever produced, before they ever existed. So when I get messages from racist people who talk about stuff like that, and who talk about, our culture today, then I have to really, explain to them why we are where we are today. And that's basically what this video is about. So when you understand that, after slavery ended and the slaves who survived set out and tried to make a life for themselves and try to find food and work and things like that, whenever they sat down and they settled and they congregated or, came together as families, what they did, the way they acted, was based upon what they learned, as slaves. Everything that they learned, even the language itself, English, talking, communicating with each other, was taught to them. They learned it. They picked it up, being slaves. So how is that being free when you are forced to live, by the culture of another people? Because your culture has been taken away and nothing has been done to rectify that, or to, get you to understand what your culture was. It's easy for people to say, man, go back to Africa and find out where you come from, or trace your roots. But those people are gone. Those people are long gone. And a lot of the cultures and traditions that was with them, we don't know if they survived or not. We don't know if other tribes carry them. We don't know. And when you look at the history, when I put the video out about the many hidden accomplishments of African people, those kingdoms are gone. One of you right now watching this, black people, you could be the descendant of a king, of queens, of royalty. Those castles are in ruins. Those kingdoms were destroyed, and there were many of them. So as I said, the people who were taken first as slaves were not just some running around with a bone in their lip disc Africans. These were intelligent black people, masters of trade, craftsmen, skilled people. As I pointed out in that video, when you look at the Nook and look at the terracotta statues that they are famous for, this takes skilled labor, skilled teaching, skilled people to accomplish these things. And it's so many African art, statues and things that have been found that people cannot believe Africans made, because they don't know our true history. So we know when we look back at our history that we had skill, that we knew things, that we had a legal system, that we had schools. So when we start looking back and trying to find these people, and we see that they're gone, we got to trace the history back, as far as it goes. And it stops in Kemet. This is why so many people follow ancient Egypt so much, because this is where it all leads to, the teachings. And most of the so-called primitive Africans, we can't go there and get that teaching from long ago, as far as ancient Egypt, because those Egyptians are, they're gone. And what's left is Africans who have carried some of the ancient teachings, still to this day. We know if you go to Nubia, Sudan now, you'll still see that the Sudanese, the people, they still wrestle. They still practice some of the traditions that was practiced in ancient Egypt. When you look at the hieroglyphics and see the competitions between the Nubians and the Egyptians, they still practice that stuff today. So some of these practices were still kept, and we need to start going back and understanding these things and learning them and teaching it to each other, and not looking at it as being primitive or corny or crazy, and really embrace what our people used as spirituality, real spirituality, and understand that we did this for thousands of years before, we were conquered, and our heritage and culture and traditions was, basically destroyed. So we had no culture here. We accepted what we was taught, and we tried to move on and build a life. We tried to be successful. Now ask yourself, if you are living in a culture with white people, and if everything is fair, and you are living as white people live and doing the same things that they are doing and being successful like they are, the result would be basically Black Wall Street.